Hey guys, welcome back to another Unreal Engine 4 Blueprint tutorial. We're back working on the Kitten Cannon clone. As it stands right now, we have a little bit of base functionality working for both the power meter and the actual cannon. The cannon rotates and changes degrees. The power meter goes from 0 to 100, and you can click on both, but that's all that really happens. We also have the base set up for our cannon ball, where we have the actual sprite flipbook, we have collision, we have the sound, and we have a projectile movement component so that we're able to launch it when the time comes to do so. And then in the event graph, we have some basic functionality for everything. We have cannon distance being set up. We cast to get a cannon reference, and we set up the camera so that it tracks the actual player once it comes down to that as well. What we're going to do in this one is we're going to set up some more, I guess, visual stuff in terms of when we want to fire the cannon. We want there to be kind of like an explosion particle effect to play. And we're going to do a little bit more functionality in that regard, just smaller things for right now. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start by creating a new flipbook of an explosion. So when the cannon goes off, it makes an explosion, and then we launch the player from there. So we're going to go into our sprites folder. Actually, no, first we're going to go into our textures folder. We're going to import the assets we need. So let me go ahead and find them here. There they are. There's a good amount of them. There's 10 in total. Actually, I think there's more than that. Let me double check. Nope, we're good. So now we have the textures imported, we can go ahead and make the sprites. It's going to be a lot like what we did for the actual cannonball, where we need to make the sprites and then we actually make the flipbook. So this may get a little repetitive or redundant, so just bear with me. Let's go ahead and create a new sprite. We'll call this sprite explosion _01. Let's Control W to duplicate, and we'll just make multiple copies of this. Do it 5 at a time here. Let's open these guys up. And we just gotta make sure we keep the order here. So explosion 1, explosion 2, explosion 3, then 4, and 5. Let's go back to our sprites here. Duplicate again. We'll do 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And we'll open these guys up. Oops. Textures here. Actually, which one do we leave off on? Okay. Which one is that? I'm confused. Okay, bigger one. Okay, so we're on this one here. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now that we have all the sprites ready, we can now make a flipbook. So let's go to Animation, Sprite Flipbook. We'll call this FB Explosion. And remember, we have 10 sprites. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. And it's just a matter of plugging these guys in. So 1, 2, 3. Let me zoom out a little bit. So we're on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks like we added 1. Nope, we got it. Perfect. So now we just gotta change how fast this is going. Let's try 25. No, 20. Okay. Well, let's say that 20 for now. Now that we have the actual flipbook done, let's go into our Cannon. Now let's make sure it's selected in our content browser. Let's go into our Cannon. Let's add it. Paper flipbook underscore FB explosion. Let's attach it to the base just so it's rotating with it. And then let's also rotate it locally just so it fits. Let's push it forward too. Let's make its Y value. Let's do 2. Let's just make sure the rotation's good. And maybe change the scale, maybe 1.25, just so it's a big explosion. There you go. And then we don't want it to actually be playing right away, so let's make sure its play rate is at 0. Now let's make sure it's not visible. Now you can also turn off any kind of collision that it has. And then we can compile that. And then in the actual event graph here, we can create a new custom event here. So let's right click, do custom event. And we'll call this play fire cannon animation. So let's grab the FB underscore explosion. First thing we want to do is set its visibility to true so that we can see it. So just make sure that's checked. And then let's grab another reference for the FB explosion. We want to set its play rate to 1, just so it starts actually animating the flipbook. And then we want to make sure that it plays from the start. So let's just grab from here, right, play from start. And then what we can do here is grab the FB explosion, and we can get its length. So get flipbook length. Returns a float, and what we can use with this float is set it as a delay. And then we can set the visibility to invisible at that point. So let's grab a copy of that, set visibility. Oops. And then make sure it's not visible. So we can plug that up. And just to test this, we can do it on click. We can call play cannon, so play fire cannon animation. Again, this is just for testing purposes, so you can see it in action. So click it, and it exploded. And we can keep doing that. I think that looks pretty good. If anything, we can maybe change the play rate here. Let's try 25. And play it just so it's a faster explosion. So that looks good. So what we can do now is a couple things. Let's first go back into our cannonball. And one thing, like I mentioned in the previous video, one of the things we're going to be doing is tracking the cannon's distance from its start position to wherever it ends up landing, just so you know how far you went. So to do that, let's get a custom event here. Oops, caps lock's on. Let's do add custom event. We call it get cannon distance. And what we can do here is get actor location. And then we can split its structural pin And what we need to do now in our construction script is get the actual cannonball's initial location and save that to its own variable. So let's get the fb_Terry. Actually, we don't even have to do that. Let's just get actor location again. And then just promote that to a variable. And now we'll call it cannon starting point. And we can just set that. Then back in the event graph, what we can do is grab that cannon starting point. We can split its structural pin, and we're going to be focusing on the x direction. So what we can do is get the actor location minus float by float, subtract the x here, and then set cannon distance to that result. So we won't be seeing if this works correctly for a while. I just want to have that in place just so we have it ready for the future. But what we can do now, let's go into our power meter blueprint. And all we've done so far is set the power meter value. So basically we get the power meter reference with the power meter value, and we set those values there. So now what we can do is some more logic and math just so we can start setting up the velocity for our actual cannon. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a new variable here. We're going to call it power value. It's going to be a float. And this is going to be a default kind of constant variable that we're going to have in place. Just so, as a constant, we can add, we can change to it, we can do anything we want to that. So what we can do here is some math. I'm going to set it to a default value of 1,000 for now. What we're going to go ahead and do is our power meter value, we're going to set this to the power value, and then we're going to go ahead, let's see here, kind of tripping up here. What we're going to actually go ahead and do, because the power meter value, it should be a number between 0 and 1. So that's what that's going to be right now. Let's see. Yeah. So we're going to need to first multiply that by 10. So let's grab a get of our power meter value. Let's times it by 10. And then reset the power meter value. So now we're getting a value from 0 to 100. But then what we want to go ahead and do is multiply that again by a constant, which is going to be our power value. So we're going to multiply that by 1,000. So it's going to be a number that's going to be between 1,000 and 100,000. So that's going to be our power value. And then what we're going to do here is some math that's going to go ahead and help us determine the velocity of our actual cannon, our cannonball, I should say. So what we're going to need to do now is get a reference to our cannon, I believe. Let me double check. No, we're going to need to get a reference to Yeah, we're gonna have to get a reference to our canon. So to do that, we'll go to our event begin play in our power meter class. We're gonna do get all actors of class, do BP canon, and get, and then cast from this result to BP canon, and then promote that to a variable. We call that canon reference. And then what we're going to do here, back under where we're setting our power meter value, we're going to grab our canon reference. We're going to get the sprite canon base. Oops. Sprite canon base. Actually, let's take a look at the canon real fast. Yeah, okay. So get sprite canon base. And then we can get its relative rotation. I guess not. So we got canon reference, let me compile real fast. Should be able to get sprite. Let's try it. What do we name it actually? I'll just call it canon base. So let's do get canon base. And then we can get its relative rotation here. And let's split this. And again, we're working with pitch. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is because with velocity for 2D, you work with the z directional velocity, the up and down velocity, and you work with the x velocity, which is the left and right. So we're going to have to split this up and do some math with the degrees here. So what we're going to do is pull for the pitch, and we're going to do cosine degrees. And then we're also going to pull from the pitch as well and do sine degrees. Now the cosine is going to end up being our x direction, and the sine is going to be our z direction. So what we're going to do here, the result power meter value that we have, we're going to multiply. So we're going to do float by float. And we're going to do that twice, so let's copy and paste that. So we're going to multiply the result of the power meter value here by the cosine result of the pitch and the sine here. And now what we're going to need to do, let's go ahead and compile real quick. Let's see. I just got to look through a couple of things. Okay, in our cannonball, we're going to make a new event, new custom event, called fire cannon. We're going to give it an input. We're going to call it velocity. It's going to be a vector. We're going to grab its projectile movement here. Then we're going to do set velocity. And we're going to connect that input into that set there. So we can compile that. Let's go back into our power meter. And what we're going to do now, from our power meter here, we're going to first we're going to go ahead and get a reference to our player character. So let's do that right now real fast. So we're going to go in our event to begin play. We're going to right click, do get player character. And from there we're going to cast that to our KC player camera. And then promote this variable. We'll call it player character reference. Now back where we were before, let's compile real fast. Let's get a reference to that player character reference. Let's do character movement. That is a variable that we have. We're just going to set the gravity scale. We're going to set this to 1.2. If you remember, we set it to 0 at the start. So let's plug that up. Now we're going to put a delay in of about 0.5 seconds. We're also going to create a custom event here called Fire Cannon. We're going to plug that to the delay. Now we're going to grab our cannon reference. And we're going to see if the cannon angle has been set. And we're going to branch. And if the camera angle has been set, that's where we're going to get our cannon reference. Actually, no, that's going to be in our cannonball that we set that up, where we have the fire cannon. So let's grab a reference to our cannonball. So we're going to do a get all actors class, BP cannonball, and then get, and then a cast to the cannonball class. And then we're going to promote this variable, call it cannonball reference. Now that we have our reference to our cannonball, let's get that cannonball reference called fire cannon. Let's split this pin up. Whoops. Split that constructional pin. Plug that up to true. And then, like I said before, the cosine, this end result here is going to go into x. The bottom result is going to go into z. And y is going to remain the same. It's going to be 0. We don't worry about the y direction because of the way we set up our scene here. And then what I'm going to do here is just turn off the collision for our power meter. So we'll do a set collision enabled. We'll set it to no collision. And then we'll do a delay of 1 second. And then we'll turn that collision back on. So now we can compile that, save, and let's just double check a couple things. Let's go into our cannon here. Let's take off the play fire cannon animation. And instead, what we're going to do is, with our power meter reference, we're going to be working with on the on click for this cannon. We're going to grab our power meter reference now. We're going to get power level set. We're going to do a branch on that. We're going to see if that's been set. Now, if it has, we're going to fire the cannon. And we're going to do the same thing we did with the collision. So we're going to turn it off, and then after a second, turn it back on. So cannon collision, set collision, enabled. And we're going to do a delay of a second. And we're going to turn it back on. And one thing I want you guys to be aware of is we do have those two. We have two different events called fire cannon. One is in our power meter, the one right here, which does the delay, checks if the angle has been set, and then fires the cannon. The other one is in our cannonball, the fire cannon here. That sets the velocity. So be aware that those are two different things. But now that we have that set up, we should be able to fire let's see if it works. So we'll fire the cannonball. No, that still doesn't work. let's see here. Let me just double check a couple things here, guys. Okay. So let's go into our cannonball here real fast. And with our cannon reference, let's call the fire cannon animation, just so that animation plays. Actually, there's something we really don't need that I'm realizing right now. We don't need this gravity scale. Get rid of that. That's not necessary. But now if we click, we're seeing the animation for the fire cannon animation working. So that's good. But for one reason or another, the velocity that we're putting in here is not working correctly. So let's first go ahead and add gravity. So we'll call projectile gravity scale. We're going to set that to 1.15. And we're doing this in the cannonball blueprint from the fire cannon. So now it's still not firing that. Let's see what's going on. The issue might be the way we're attaching the cannonball here. So let's take up the event tick here. Let's see if it launches. There we go. Okay, so the issue was the fact that we were on the event tick in our cannonball, we were setting the world location here. So what we can do instead, let's Control X that. What we can do on the fire cannon, we can detach that. We can paste back in our set world location. And what else we can do now is make our cannonball invisible. So let's put in that set visibility that we had there lying around from the last video. And then let's copy that. And then on the fire cannon, let's go ahead and make him visible. So now if we play, okay, so that's not getting called, or he's not being shown. Oh, that's because that's not plugged in. Okay, let's try that again. And we can see him, he's just going flying. So now we need a way to track the player. So to do that, what we need to do now is on our event tick, let's first grab our delta seconds and let's promote that to a variable called delta time. And now we're going to make a new custom event. We're going to call this spawn camera. And we're just going to call this on event tick just so it's there. Now in the spawn camera, what we're going to go ahead and do is basically tell it, hey, follow the player at this point. So let's grab our new player camera that we made. We're going to set actor transform. And now what we're going to do is grab a T interp2. So over time, we're going to interpolate a transform. So for delta time, we're going to grab our variable, plug that in. For interp speed, set that to 30 for right now. And now for the current transform, let's grab the new camera, the new player camera. We're going to do a get actor transform. Plug that into current. And then for target, we're going to grab our player camera reference. We're going to grab the player camera. And then we're going to get its world transform. And put that into target. So, we got an error here. We didn't put the return value in, so let's put that return value of the t interp 2 into the new transform for that set actor transform. And now once we fire, we should be able to follow the player. And that's working, but we can see kind of like a weird jitter. So we want to increase the interp 2, so let's make this 100. So the jitter's still there, but it's not as noticeable here, so we're going to leave that alone for now. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. So we basically got the cannon to fire, and we're able to follow the player. So what we need to do now is give him the ability to bounce. We want to limit, the speed that we can go, the max velocity in the x and y directions, and do all that good stuff. So that's going to be in the next video. But for right now, that's going to be it for this one. So again, just to kind of recap, we did the spawn camera here with the transforms. We did the fire cannon here where we set the velocity, play the fire cannon animation. We set the gravity scale. We made the actual flipboard visible this time. One thing we may want to go ahead and do, actually no, I think we actually have that in place where we set that world location. So yeah, in the power meter blueprint, that's where we get these values, and that's where we can actually change things drastically. So for power value, instead of that being like 1,000, we can make that 5. And we should see the speed, be not as fast. So right there, he's not going too fast. But we are seeing that the gravity is not what we want it to be, so we may need to add back that gravity that we took out before. So it was in between these two guys. So let's get our player character reference. Let's get the character movement. And let's set the gravity scale. Set that to 1.2. And plug everything back up. So now if we fire, okay, so we're still seeing gravity not doing what it needs to do. So let's try to figure that out. Because right now, let's take a look at a couple things. Oh, okay. What we can do now is go into our world settings here, and let's not override gravity anymore. And now we're seeing that he's falling. So now if we increase our power value from 5 to 500, let's say, we should see him come back down. So we're seeing that work. So that's perfect. So that was my mistake. The one correction we made was we undid override world gravity and then put in those parameters where we needed them to be. So again, that's going to be it for this one. What we're going to do next is allow, I guess, give the cannonball the ability to bounce, so that it doesn't just keep falling forever. It's just going to bounce, 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 and as it bounces, reduce its z and x velocity, and then from there we should be able to start working on the different hazards that exist, like the explosives, the spikes, the trampolines, all that good stuff. So that's going to be a fun part of it. But for now, I want to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, thanks again for watching this blueprint tutorial. If you enjoyed the content and you haven't already subscribed to me, click on me or the subscribe button above to subscribe to the Devin Level Design channel. Also, if you like the video, make sure you click the like button, comment with all your suggestions and all your tips and everything you do. I always enjoy hearing from you guys. Also, share the video, make sure the content gets out there for everybody. And on my right, you should see more videos for more blueprint examples, more blueprint tutorials for you guys to check out. But for now, again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!